Hey everyone, hope you've all been having a great .NET Conf. My name's Nick Randolph and today we're going to be looking at building Windows applications using WinUI 3 and .NET. Now actually we're also going to be looking at the Windows App SDK. For those who don't know, WinUI 3 or just WinUI now ships as part of the Windows App SDK. So we're going to be covering both in the session. Let's just jump into it. What is the Windows App SDK? Well, according to Microsoft, it is a set of new developer components and tools that represents the next evolution in Windows app development platform. It also provides a unified set of APIs and tools that can be used in a consistent way by any desktop app on Windows 11 and down level to Windows 10. So essentially, this means that Microsoft is looking at using the Windows App SDK as the delivery vehicle for new developer APIs and features that will be coming to the platform. So it doesn't matter whether you're a Windows Form, WPF, or Windows UI developer. You can take advantage of the Win App SDK in order to access these up-and-coming APIs and tools, etc. It doesn't supersede the Windows SDK, that still ships with the core platform. But unlike the Windows SDK, which is versioned with the platform, the Windows App SDK is iterated separately. And you can, as a developer, can choose when and if you want to update to the latest version of the Windows App SDK. What's included in the Windows App SDK? Okay, well, these are the components that currently ship as part or the components that make up the Windows App SDK. So the first one being deployment options is actually come from the feedback from the UWP kind of experiment, if you call it that, where developers, a lot of developers liked the packaging format, but there were obviously some limitations and developers wanted more control in some scenarios. And so for the Windows App SDK, you can either use the packaged or unpackaged options in terms of deploying your application. WinUI 3, or just WinUI, ships with the Windows App SDK, and essentially this is all of those visual components that made up for UWP. Those have been detached from the Windows platform and made available as part of the Windows App SDK. Again, those are going to be versioned independently from the core OS, meaning your application can take a dependency on it without having to be tied into the versioning alongside the platform. The Windows App SDK also provides APIs around app lifecycle. So, for example, whether you want to be a single instance or multi-instance app and be able to reference the running instances of your application. It also provides APIs around power management and windowing. So you can create new windows, you can detect when power management changes on your device. And also there's support for push notifications and other app notifications within the SDK. Version 1.2 of the SDKs are soon to be released, and this includes a number of new features and a lot of sort of bug fixes and updates as well. One of the hotly anticipated features that is coming in as part of 1.2 is the ability for third-party developers to create their own widgets for Windows. Developers using .NET can also trim their application, so significantly reducing the size of the deployed application. Applications can also make better use of HDR displays, accessing the information using the display information class. WinUI 3 has been updated to include the media player element and the media transport controls. It's also been updated with the latest controls, styles, and behaviors from WinUI 2. So at this point, WinUI 2X has basically gone into sort of more like a maintenance kind of mode, and all new development will carry out on WinUI 3. So new controls and styles, etc., will come to WinUI 3. With only bug fixes and maintenance stuff being done on WinUI 2. And so essentially, this means that newer apps should take a dependency on the Windows App SDK in order to leverage the benefits of WinUI 3. There's also an app notification builder class that makes sending notifications easier rather than having to use the XML payload. And title bar customization is now available for Windows 10 based applications as well. One big note to note is that despite their original estimate for releasing the 1.2 SDK on November 1st, it's actually been pushed back to the November the 15th, just due to a number of last-minute bug fixes that had to be made. So let's just jump in and have a look at some of these new features. The first one we're going to take a look at is widgets. So here we've got a sample widget that's actually part of the samples that are available for the Windows App SDK. you'll see here that there are two projects. The first one is the sample widget provider app is essentially the implementation of our widget. And so right now, widgets do need, the provider for widgets does need to be written in native code. And obviously there is a long-term view that the managed version will be made available. But in the 1.2 timeframe, the code needs to be written in native code. The second project is a packaging project, and so this is where we can actually configure the widgets for our application. So if we take a look at the package app manifest, take a look at the code, when we scroll down here, we can see that there's a couple of additional things here being registered. So we've got a Windows Conf server. So essentially, this is the registration of the implementation library for our widgets. And then down here, we've actually got a registration of the widgets themselves. So here we can see that there's a counting widget and a weather widget. And you can see here that there's a reference back up to this Conf server as the implementation for those widgets. Now, the implementation of the widgets, if we just drop into the code, we can see that we've actually got, essentially there's a button on the screen that when you click it, it increments the counter. So essentially, this is the logic that actually increments the counter. Now, in terms of the actual way that the widget is laid out, that's defined by these JSON files. If we open these, you'll see that it doesn't really make a huge amount of sense other than we can tell that it's an adaptive card with a bunch of text renders. So let me just grab this code, and what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at adaptivecards.io. So this is actually installed, it's a website, so adaptivecards.io, you go to the website, and this has been installed as a PWA, so it basically looks and behaves like an application, but it essentially is just a website. We're going to create a blank card, and from the host app type here, we've selected widget board, and this basically just controls the overall look and behavior of it. So if you're doing Teams development, you can actually switch to using Teams for the adaptive card style. We're actually going to drop our card payload into the screen down here. So this is the code that came from Visual Studio, and we can see that our card has been updated to look similar to what we'd expect it to look on a widget board. We can then go ahead and modify our text in here. So basically it says you've clicked the button X number of times. Okay, so hang on, there's a substitution here for count. So in our sample data editor, let's go ahead and actually include a count property in here. And so now we can actually see how it's rendering with you click the button one time. Now, I'm just going to add a little bit more text to here. So we're going to say for .NET Conf. And you notice here that it's now going off the screen, so we now need that to wrap. So now we can update our code. We can grab a copy of this and go back to Visual Studio where we can just drop our replacement code in here. Now we can go ahead and actually deploy the packaging app. So this will build our provider app and then deploy it to the local environment. This will take a second or two. And once this is done, we can actually go to the widget board and we can go and include our counting widget, so we can actually see how it's going to behave on our widget board. So let's take a second or two to build it. And build and deployed. Now we can go to our widget board and go to the plus at the top here. And from our widget settings, we can then find the count widget, select on that, and that's going to go ahead and add it to our widget board. So you can see the widget pinned. And what will happen now is our actual the provider app will actually be started up. And so if we go back to our widget board, we'll actually see that it renders correctly now. Give it a second or two to warm up. And there it's displaying, and it's going to go ahead and display in a second. There we go. So now we can hit the increment button, and it's going to go ahead and increment that counter for us. Okay. Now it'd be really good to be able to attach to debugger, and for that we can go to our debug menu, attach to process. And so this is going to return a list of all of the running processes. I'm going to filter that down to just the ones that include the word widget. take a second or two. Select the sample widget provider and click attach. And I'm just going to check that we actually have a breakpoint set. So let's go to our counting widget. And yes, we've got a breakpoint set. So if I go to our widget now, and I click on our increment button, that breakpoint will be hit, and we can then step through our code to actually debug the widget. Okay, next up, we're actually going to switch across, and we're going to take a look at the WinUI Gallery app. Essentially, this is a demo app or an app that's available in the store. So if you look up WinUI 3 Gallery, you can download it, and basically it's a showcase of all of the controls that are available for you as a developer as part of the Windows App SDK for WinUI 3. So let's go and open that. And you'll see here, it's quite a nice styled app, and it behaves well on Windows. So as I resize, you'll see that things like the navigation view on the left-hand side resizes down to a list of icons. And then as I scroll back out again, it'll actually expand out again. I can search this for components that I might be interested in. So if I go and search for Windows on here, it'll give me the APIs for creating multiple windows. And so from here, I can take a look at the source code. So I expand that out, and you can see here that the code for creating a window is actually relatively straightforward. I can click on the button, and it'll actually launch a new instance of the new window. And so I can do that multiple times. The other thing that's really interesting here is the title bar support. So you'll notice at the top here, the title goes all the way into the top title bar. And the application looks as if it extends all the way into the title bar, so there's no defined title bar there. If I switch back to use this button to set the system title bar, you can see what the title bar would normally look like. So getting rid of that or switching back to the custom title bar just gives it a little bit more fit and finish to the application. And then you can override and set things like the background or the foreground colors of these buttons in the top corner as well. And again, the source code for this is included in this app, so it's relatively straightforward. You can define UI elements that are going to appear in that title bar, and then define that you want to specify a custom title bar. Some of the other things that are worth noting, if we take a look at some of the style elements in here, we can take a look at some of the things like the mica and acrylic backgrounds. So if I actually create a window with mica, you can actually see that it's got a different style background. I can switch between mica and acrylic, and you can see that it's got different bleed behaviors based on the different type of backdrop behaviors. So this is the Windows UI 3 Gallery style application. I'd highly recommend you take a look. It's got the ability to generate XAML code that you can just drop into your application to take advantage of those features. So far, we've really just focused on the sort of the fluent design that WinUI brings with it. Now, one of the really interesting things about WinUI and XAML is the ability to essentially restyle it. And so one of the core capabilities of WinUI and XAML is that it has this concept of lookless controls. And by that I mean controls that have got a control template, or just a template, that can be overridden to adjust the look and feel of a control without affecting the behavior of the control. So in other words, the look of the control isn't tied directly to the actual underlying behavior. And this is one of the things that's actually quite unique to this platform. And so whilst WinUI ships with the fluent design language, you can actually restyle all the controls to take advantage of that. And so the Uno team have actually got a set of style libraries that are available to support a Cupertino look and feel and a material look and feel. But since an Uno app is essentially a WinUI application that's been made available on multiple platforms, any of the sort of the investments that the Uno team have put into things like these style libraries, you as a Windows UI developer can take advantage of. And one of those investments has actually been in a Figma toolkit. And so we're going to take a quick look at the Figma material toolkit that's available for the Uno platform, and how we can then apply that and use it for a WinUI based application. So we'll switch across and have a look at the Uno platform material toolkit. For those people who are just getting started with this, there's a really good getting started guide as you get into it, and this will walk you through, configuring the styles, configuring the typography, the look and behavior that you want to get out of the toolkit. So it's worth walking through this style guide at the beginning, but then you can jump through the various components. So for example, if you want to adjust the colors and the typography and the elevations, etc., you can do that via the styles board. There are various components that are available here, and the nice thing here is that you can see the components and you can see all the variants of the components and how they would look within the application that you're designing. There's a number of other preset components, so lists and cards and swipes and stuff like that, that you can use within your application. And finally, there's an example application that shows you how easily you can use Figma to build out the look and feel of your application. Now we're going to come back to this in a little bit and show how we can take these designs and use the plugin that the Uno team have built to actually extract the design into a set of XAML files that can be used within your application. The next thing we're going to look at is the Uno extensions. And again, this has also been developed by the Uno platform, and it's pretty close to my heart since I've been fairly invested in helping the team with these Uno extensions. They're based on what Microsoft has done with the Microsoft extensions. And so it's designed to provide sort of a simple mechanism to bootstrap a WinUI or Uno-based application. So it provides fundamental infrastructure such as a DI container, logging, configuration, settings, and we've also added in a couple of high-level abstractions such as navigation and reactive extensions that essentially allow for a more MVU style development, or in our case MVUX, since we're still making use of XAML and data binding. So we're actually going to go ahead and create a WinUI based application using the Uno extensions template, and then we're going to drop in the designs from our Figma file and see how that all plugs together. So we'll go ahead and use the multi-platform app, Uno Extensions app template. So this is a .NET New template that's available from NuGet. You can install those, and now once you install them as a .NET New template, they'll also now surface up within Visual Studio. So we can go ahead and click Next on this and go ahead and create our Uno-based application. We'll click Next again, and what we're going to do here is configure the target platforms that we want to make available. Now, for the purpose of this, we're actually going to remove all of them except WinUI, and we'll leave the testing and the reactive extensions included there as well. So go ahead and create that. And we'll reload our application. And you'll notice here that this has been set up as a more fully fledged application. So it's not just a single app that's basically just a hello world. It's got a number of pages that make up our views. So it's got a main page, second page, and it allows obviously some navigation between those. There's a separate project that includes view models. And as you'd imagine, that there are going to be some testing projects that jumpstart your ability to test both unit tests, but also UI-based tests, so you can actually run those as well. We're going to go ahead and run up this application, and you'll notice that it's a very simple application, but does provide some basic constructs around navigation between pages. Let's actually make sure that we're starting our Windows app. So that's the startup project, deploy that. But one of the things that you will notice when the application runs and launches is that the style has been changed, and the style by default for the Uno extension is the material style. So you'll notice that the buttons now have a sort of a rounded style that's typical of the material design language. There we go, we can enter our name and that gets then passed through to the second page. And you'll also notice on the second page, we now have this navigation bar that allows us to navigate back to the previous page. And so that's all using this sort of higher level navigation abstraction that's part of the Uno extensions. So what we're going to do is actually stop. We're going to open our main page. And this is the XAML that kind of makes up our page at the moment. So we've got a navigation bar followed by the text box and the button on the screen. We're going to switch across to Figma and we're actually going to grab the search products page and we're going to launch the Uno platform plugin. We're going to switch to the XAML, hit the refresh button, select copy all of our XAML from here, go back to our application, drop that into here, scroll up. And there's a minor build error here that I just need to add a namespace and then we should be good to run. Now, when our application now runs, the XAML that we copied from Figma will now update the UI and it should look similar to what we had in the Figma file. Now, obviously we're not loading any data, but essentially the overall look of our page has mirrored what's come from Figma. And so you can imagine that this is going to streamline the process of design through to development as we start to build out our application. So the next thing we're going to look at is Template Studio. And this is one of the things that has been shipped and is supported for WinUI developers. And it's going to make it, again, easy for you to jumpstart your application using the Template Studio. So let's just switch back to our design and we're going to go and use the Template Studio for WinUI. So this is an extension that does need to be downloaded and installed for Visual Studio. So we'll go ahead and create next. And what this then does is walk you through essentially a wizard for creating your application. So you can pick the project type. So we're going to go with a navigation pane. We'll use the MView toolkit. We're going to add in a couple of extra pages. So we'll go, we'll grab a blank page, we'll grab a web view, and we're going to add in a settings page. The next thing we're going to do is come down here. We're actually going to tick the self-contained option. So basically what this means is that the Windows App SDK runtime components are actually going to be shipped alongside our application. This will mean our application deployment size is actually package size is going to be bigger, but it does mean that we can then version our application independently of the underlying Windows App SDK. And lastly, we'll include our test project. Go ahead and create that. There we go, and we'll go ahead and actually run our application. And now with our application running, what we're actually going to do is we're going to take a look at some of these the tools that are available in Visual Studio to support our development. So let's just actually turn on the adorners and we'll go ahead and select an element. So we hit on the main and you'll notice that behind the scenes, the live visual tree has been updated to select the component that we've actually clicked on here. We can also go to the live property explorer and we can see what the current properties are for that particular element. But what we're actually going to do is just drop into our main page. So let me go back to our Solution Explorer, come down here to our main page. And what we're going to do is actually put some content into here. So we're going to do text block, text equals main content. And I'll hit save and we'll go back to our app and we've got hot reload so we can actually view the element that's been displayed there. Now, we can't do everything. So for example, if I was going to actually add in a button here and I wanted to say content equals click me, like that. And obviously this is going to create an event handler for it. Now we're going to get into the situation where hot reload won't work and we will actually need to restart our application in order for this click handler to be wired up correctly. So the last thing we're going to really look at is just some of the performance characteristics of WinUI and how you can take advantage of some of the tooling to actually analyze your WinUI-based application. Now, the first one is if we run our application, you'll notice that the diagnostic tool panel basically appears, and we can actually see some runtime metrics for our application. So you can see things like memory usage, processor usage, etc. But if you wanted to get more information or more detailed information, you can actually use a thing called .NET Trace. And so what we can do from a command line is actually use .NET Trace, and we can start it collecting on a particular port. Now, in order for our application to take advantage of that, or to generate information that's going to be captured here, we actually need to make a slight modification to the way our application is deployed. And so for that, we'll go across to under Properties, we'll look at the launch settings, and under the unpackaged option, we're going to drop in some environmental variables. From the drop down here, we'll select Unpackaged, and we'll then run without the debugger. And you'll notice as soon as this starts running, that our .NET Trace that we had started running is now capturing information. And when we close our application, it'll actually complete that trace. And if I do a dir there, you'll see the net trace file. So this net trace file can be opened in Visual Studio, but there's another application called SpeedScope that's also pretty good at viewing trace-based information. In order to use that though, we need to call .NET Trace and actually convert the format type. Like that. And now we can come back to SpeedScope, we can browse for our SpeedScope file, we can open that, and now we can see a number of different views of our application and the way that it's performing. So we can use this to basically drill down and take a look at what's consuming time and what's taking time for the running of our application. The last thing we're going to look at is the ability to trace or to trim our .NET based application. And for that, we're going to come back to our application and we're going to apply trimming to it. So here, if we go to our project properties, and we're going to add in publish trimmed here, set that to true. And now if we build our application, what we should see here is that we're going to say there's going to be an error that is basically not yet supported. And this is because currently this application that I created with the Template Studio is actually referencing the version 1.1.3 of the Windows App SDK. So what we'll do is come down to NuGet packages, and we'll go ahead and update to the preview of version 1.2. Update there, accept that. Now when we go ahead and build our application, we'll actually see that there are a number of kind of warnings here. And so what's really important when you apply trimming, and I would recommend, particularly if you're looking at minimizing the size of your application, is to employ trimming. I would highly recommend looking through these warnings and make sure you test your application before you ship it. And that basically wraps up the session. Here's a bunch of more information that you can grab in terms of providing more information about Windows UI, the Windows App SDK. Of course, if you need to get hold of me, my name is Nick Randolph, nick@builtrandolph.com, or on Twitter @TheNickRandolph. Feel free to hit me up for some information about the Windows UI or Windows App SDK. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great .NET Conf.